Welcome back. Time is 7:42 as we take a live look now at the nation's capital. The federal government officially shut down this morning, meaning tens of thousands of federal employees will soon go without pay. In Charlotte, jobs like air traffic controllers, TSA employees could be some of the most impacted groups. We could also see slowdowns in our postal system, among other services. Our chief local analyst, Colin Furloughs, joining us now to talk about if the shutdown, if employees could have any recourse. And what I want to ask you about is, yes, we know about the TSA employees. They are scheduled to show up, but the Trump administration has also talked about taking these layoffs and maybe just making them permanent. If that were to happen, would these employees have any recourse?
Julian, we got lots of things to talk about. The 1201, it seemed like everyone was waiting to see if the parties could come together, and they obviously could not, and that's why we have this shutdown. So I got a couple things I can drop on you, and I think they'll answer some of your questions. 35, that's the number of days that the last shutdown lasted, 2018 going into 2019. Ironically, Trump's last administration, President Trump's last administration, that was the last shutdown that we had, 35 days. And we're talking about some things that I think will be effective when you talk about folks having their jobs, furloughs, RIFs, and then lawsuits. Furloughs is when you leave work, paid leave, you're on some extended absence, and your job is supposed to be held there for you. So you're not terminated, but this job is still being held for you. Or those RFIs, that reduction in force. And that's what you're talking about with President Trump saying, hey, moving forward, we may talk about and think about not just bringing these folks back at all. And before the shutdown even happened, letters went out last week to a number of departments within the administration to say just that. Start going through and looking for folks that we don't need to go back, that are not aligning with what the president wants to do in terms of his approach to removing DEI and a number of things throughout the administration. The only issue is that it's required that they give notice, that these individuals give an opportunity to be heard, and none of that is happening or has already happened. They've only sent the notice to the folks that are attempting to do the reduction, not to the folks to get an opportunity to keep or save their job. The last thing I'll say is lawsuits. Yesterday, unions that represent a number of the federal employees that will be impacted by this filed lawsuits, basically stating that, I mean, because it's hard to summarize hundreds of pages, but summarizing that these lawsuits are attempting to stop something that is being done that is retaliatory in nature. That this is the end game, and the end goal originally was that we can force a shutdown to force the jobs to be removed permanently anyway. In terms of those TSA folks, just like it happened in 18 and 19, yes, those folks showed up to work, but what did the studies show? When you go back and look at what happened, lots of missed days, lots of sick days, because during that time they're showing up to work without a paycheck. So yeah, there will be lost jobs and missed paychecks during this time, and the only recourse is either some type of injunction to stop, to force them to be paid out of some type of secured fund, reserve fund. But right now, none of that is happening, and that's why those unions have already filed those claims to get some of these things to ball in motion early.
Yeah, the American Federation of Government Employees, one of them, already saying, to block the mass layoffs. When we talk about the injunctions, right? I love this because you take us to injunction conjunction every morning on this show. You need to show to cause and harm, right? So can you do that if they haven't been laid off yet? How does that process work of asking a judge to stop something when they haven't been harmed yet?
So part B right there is that ripeness that we talked about the other day. It's not ripe yet if you haven't been an injury. In fact, you're not a party to the claim if you don't have an injury. And then the other portion, if we're talking about dollars, if we're talking about money, can you get an injunction there? Because irreparable harm is something that in its name that money can't fix. This is something that you have to be able to say, I can't throw $1 at this amount. And so an injunction in that sense would not be appropriate if your irreparable harm is the end game, because if I lose my job, if I'm wrongfully terminated, the recourse within the legal system is to sue for back pay. And the courts have held, even with these last things with the TSA workers, that Congress even implemented a law to ensure that these folks, when they actually got back the government to running, that they would be given back pay. So the folks that keep their job, there's a recourse for them, and the individuals that's terminated, there's a recourse for them, but injunction may not be the way. Just trying to stop it before the layoffs occur, that could be something that could happen, but I think a judge may not be inclined to do that.
What do you think, real quickly, I think we have about 45 seconds left, what do you see happening if the Trump administration goes to get rid of some of these employees, the RIFs, as we mentioned there? What do you think will play out?
I mean, it's more lawsuits. I mean, if you terminate someone without giving notice specifically underneath this RIFs, these reduction in force, you have to give them notice and an opportunity to be heard. And the Trump administration previously was not doing that. You have to notify the states where these layoffs are occurring. They weren't doing that as well. So there are a number of hurdles that have to jump through before you can terminate a federal employee. We used to say that a federal employee was the safest person on the planet in terms of employment. Now it does not seem like that is the case. And so these individuals are now, uncertainty is probably the best thing I can leave them off with.
Certain job may be an attorney with all the lawsuits that we're seeing. Again, our chief legal analyst, Kylie Furloughs, weighing in on that.
Queen City News Plus. Just search Queen City News on your smart TV's app store.